go number 2.
Welcome to Big Flick Energy. As a huge Guardians of the Galaxy fan, I was extremely excited to see what James Gunn could do with the Suicide Squad. It ended up being some radical combination of the Guardians of the Galaxy, The Boys, and a war film that I absolutely loved. Gunn once again made characters that are nobodies in the comics fan favorites in the films, with Peacemaker, Bloodsport, Ratcatcher, and Polka Dot Man. He also saved Rick Flag from being a bland character, did King Shark and Starro justice, and continued Harley Quinn and Amanda Waller's stellar hot streaks of amazing performances. This film ended with a post-credit scene showing us that Peacemaker is still alive, which will most definitely lead into what the Peacemaker TV show on HBO Max coming out in January 2022 is all about. Outside of this show, however, we really don't know much about what James Gunn's future with DC will be. We do know that he will continue working with them though, so today we'll discuss what could be next on the table for James Gunn and DC. Gunn already said a Suicide Squad sequel isn't out of the question for what his work could be down the road. I have way too many ideas of what could be next, so I decided to split this video into 2 parts, the first focusing on the Suicide Squad sequels and the other being on original projects Gunn could take on. Before I start with part 1, I just want to say that because the Spider-Man trailer just came out and that trailer was incredible, I'm gonna do this video, then the Spider-Man trailer, and then I will do part 2. So here we go. To start off, I want to discuss the characters who could be on the Suicide Squad, and then I'll go into potential villains for the film. First off, we have the Gunn survivors. These are the characters that made it out alive in this film, and I actually may make a video down the road of what's next for each of these characters. Among these are Harley Quinn, Nanaue, Bloodsport, Peacemaker, Weasel, and Ratcatcher. With the way the film ended with Waller agreeing to let them go, most of these probably will not be in the next film. But I could see Weasel and Peacemaker there, since they were not part of the deal. The next group are the Ammo Squatters. These are the characters that Gunn considered for this film, but ultimately decided to not include on the team. I actually may make a video down the road to discuss who each of these characters actually are by going into their origins and enemies. These characters are Livewire, Punch and Julie, Black Spider, Deathstroke, Man-Bat, Plastique, Chemo, KG Beast, Solomon Grundy, Rainbow Creature, Gunhawk, Knockout, Bane, Killer Frost, Mr. Freeze, and Batmite. Deathstroke was probably the closest character to having been in this film, as we literally have some artwork where we see Deathstroke as the leader of the team. Bloodsport was pretty much the person who replaced Deathstroke in this film. I'm happy with this because I like to see unknown characters be lifted up by Gunn, and I already know a lot about Deathstroke, but I can definitely see Deathstroke as the team leader in the sequel because of how close he was to being in this film. The next group are the Ayers. These are the characters who survived David Ayer's Suicide Squad and were not in this film. These characters are Deadshot, Killer Croc, Katana, and Joker. Deadshot is the most likely of these characters mainly because he wasn't in Gunn's Suicide Squad because of Will Smith's scheduling conflicts. I could see all of them joining the team though, and Joker on this squad would be insane, and I believe Gunn could finally do Leto's Joker some justice. The next group are the Bell Revers. These are characters we saw in Gunn's film in the Bell Rev prison, but we're not included on the team. These characters are Calendar Man, Double Down, and Kaleidoscope. I would honestly see these 3 being members like what we saw in Mongol and T.D.K, where they're killed off at the beginning of the film to show the stakes and for a good laugh. The last group are the DCEU squad. These are characters who have been mentioned or seen in other DCEU films and could be made into squad members the same way Gunn wanted to do with Deathstroke and Black Manta. This group includes Cheetah, Feora, Huntress, Cassandra Cain, and Penguin. Cheetah's an interesting one because we saw her lose her abilities by the end of Wonder Woman 1984. However, I have a theory that I'll make into another video to talk about how I think she may still have a few tricks up her sleeve. Now, I could see other characters like Orca or Mad Hatter joining this team, but those are more personal picks and the list would be way too long to go over all of the possibilities. Now that we're done with that though, off to the potential villains for the Suicide Squad sequel. First up, we have the Suicide Squad versus the Justice League. This would be a really fun film which could bring back some of DC's most beloved characters. To see Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Flash, Cyborg, Aquaman, and maybe Martian Manhunter return would be incredible. In my opinion, however, this is the least likely film to happen. First off, Gunn said himself he thought about it, but we have no idea what the Justice League even is at this point, so he wanted to stay away from it. With Ray Fisher saying he won't do another DC project until he gets an apology from Walter Amada and his team, Ben Affleck seeming done after The Flash, and Warner Bros. Completely mishandling Henry Cavill as Superman, who knows how long it could take before this film is made. It would also be the most expensive option, having to bring back all of the big-time actors from the Justice League, unless if they make a completely new Suicide Squad team with lesser-known actors, which wouldn't really be too exciting. Lastly, a video game called Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is currently being made, so reusing that concept could be a pretty lazy decision, unless if the Suicide Squad will be posed as the antagonist of the film. But then it's not much of a Suicide Squad film really, so I don't see this being the film, but we'll just have to wait and see. Next up, we have the Suicide Squad versus Mr.
Today, Junior!
The Suicide Squad versus Mr. Mxyzptlk, a fifth dimensional being who none of the Suicide Squad members stand a chance against. The only way I could see this character being a villain is if Batmite, another fifth dimensional being, is in this film as well. The only reason I bring this potential sequel up is because Gunn has made it public knowledge that his favorite DC character is Batmite. Batmite is one of the most overpowered characters in DC and has an obsession with Batman. This could be a very wacky film that would be fun to see, but I personally see Batmite coming into play in a solo film more than in a Suicide Squad film. Or maybe you could join up with Batman one day. Next up, we have the Suicide Squad versus Superman or Superman alternatives. This would be a very fun film to see that could truly pose Amanda Waller as a certified antagonist in the DCEU, where she wants to take out Superman for a similar reason as Batman in Batman vs. Superman. The only issue with this is I think we are past Superman being thought of as an antagonist by humans, as that's been done already. What hasn't been done is Superman actually being an antagonist. But we know Zack Snyder was setting him up to eventually be an antagonist, so this film would sadly ruin the chances of the Snyderverse being restored, since Superman would become an antagonist before we know he actually becomes one. This would be unless the film takes place in the aftermath of Darkseid taking over Earth, and is sort of a prequel to Batman Nightmares, where Suicide Squad are sort of the last resort to save the Earth. Other options could be Superman alternatives like Cyborg Superman, Bizarro, or Faora. Bizarro is sort of like negative Superman, where green kryptonite actually strengthens him, and blue kryptonite weakens him. He also has freeze vision and heat breath. He is sometimes used as a goofy comic foil, and depending on the story, is a hero or a villain. I could see Gunn making him an extremely lovable and misunderstood villain. Faora could also be an interesting one since we last saw her in the Phantom Zone. If she comes back, she could be a deadly threat for Earth, and the Suicide Squad could be brought in to not only try to take down a villain, but to also test if they can handle a being on par with Superman. Next up, we have the Suicide Squad versus Mongul. Not Mongao, Mongul. The Suicide Squad started off with a scene where we saw a ton of the squad members get killed off, one of which was Mongao. Her appearance in this film was pretty strange because she's fought against Superman level characters in the comics before, and died from burning in this film. She was very much nerfed in this film, but killing her off could be a smart strategy for the future. You see, the reason she's so powerful in the comics is because of who her father is, Mongul. Mongul is the overlord of Warworld in the comics, and in his first confrontation with Superman, actually beat him in a fight. So if Mongul is the main antagonist, perhaps he will come to Earth to seek revenge for his daughter Mongao, and this would be a very dangerous threat for the Suicide Squad to take on. Next up, we have the Suicide Squad versus Amazo. So a good friend of mine actually gave me this idea, and I think it could work depending on the team. Also, that good friend I'm talking about runs his own artwork Instagram with some really cool pieces on characters like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Superman, and you guys should really check him out. His username is on the screen and in the caption down below. So, I think Amazo could work only if the Suicide Squad members of the sequel have more diverse power sets. You see, Amazo is a character that copies the abilities of its opponents, and the character like this probably wouldn't work all too well when half the team members just have weapons. If Amazo were to be done, the team would need to use some of the characters Gunn almost used for this first one, like Killer Frost and Livewire, to make Amazo seem like an actual threat. Next up, we have the Suicide Squad versus Poison Ivy. One of the few similarities between the first and second Suicide Squad was both antagonists' ability to create an army through mind control. It's very possible the villain of the next part could have this same ability. Poison Ivy could be a great choice for this role given she can use her pheromones to make people do her bidding. Outside of this, Gunn just used Starro as a villain who we were supposed to sympathize with when he said he was happy in space staring at the stars. Given we're living in a time where man-made global warming is in the headlines, I could see Gunn playing with Ivy as the villain, where we can really sympathize with her, and this could maybe be through the lens of Harley, who's a good friend of Ivy and on occasion, her lover. Next up, we have the Suicide Squad versus Grodd. This is another character who would use mind control to have an army, and I fell in love with this character through the animated Justice League series, because of how menacing he was and how he could outsmart anybody. Although Gunn loves to make his big CGI characters more cute and friendly than menacing, we saw Nanaue be pretty ruthless in some scenes in the Suicide Squad, and I could see Gunn bringing that back with Grodd. Next up, we have the Suicide Squad versus Chemo. Chemo is a character who Gunn actually wanted to include in the Suicide Squad, but he realized his abilities would be a hazard to the team and they wouldn't work in a team environment. So my idea for this is based on why Gunn didn't use him in the film. Imagine in the film, Chemo wants to be a part of the team but is never given an opportunity to join, so he breaks out and tries to prove his worth. You could make for a pretty comedic villain that would make a story out of the truth behind why he wasn't in this first film. It could be a lot of fun, and I feel like fans would fall in love with his character, and this could be another villain that fans feel for. Lastly, we have the Suicide Squad versus the Suicide Squad. So, yeah, this is an idea that's somewhat similar to Captain America Civil War, where we have characters on both sides we've grown to love, fighting against each other, and we'll probably have to pick a side. I wouldn't necessarily see this being the next Suicide Squad film, but I could see it being the grand finale of Gunn's Suicide Squad trilogy. Imagine in the next part, Gunn gives us an entirely new team we grow to love, and then in the third part, puts the two teams against each other. Now that Bloodsport Squad is free from Waller, perhaps Waller eventually sends a new Suicide Squad to hunt down the members who abandoned the mission. One team led by Bloodsport, the other led by Peacemaker, who is getting his own show. One team of the freed members, the other of Waller's new work dogs. Just imagine the end credit of the Suicide Squad film before this being Waller calling in the new squad, saying something like, Task Force X, you have a new mission operative. Hunt down the Suicide Squad. And it shows a picture of the members of Bloodsport Squad, and then the screen goes black.
Holy cow.
This would also be a great film to close the books on Amanda Waller, where she has proven herself as an antagonist and could either be killed by Bloodsport, or perhaps he releases the video he kept of the US hiding the truth behind Starro, and she goes down, ending up being in Belle Reve herself, where you already know the other criminals will eat her alive. If this film ends up happening, I really don't care what other movie is coming out that year. This will easily be #1 on my must-watch list. So, these are some of the Suicide Squad sequels I can see happening, and even if Gunn chooses another path, I'm really excited to see what he has planned for the franchise. Remember, this is part 1 of my 2 video series where we discuss what's next for James Gunn. So like and subscribe, and time in next time on Big Flick Energy to find out some more projects I would love to see Gunn take on.